Today is Saturday, May 25th. The number of people losing money to con artists is on the rise. The Federal Trade Commission says the most common grift is an imposter scheme, usually with the scammer pretending to be from a trusted entity like your bank. Last year, Americans lost more than $2.7 billion to imposter scams. And while we'd all like to think we would never fall for something like this, the truth is anyone can, including someone who now gives money advice for a living. I'm speaking with Katie Gaddy Tassan, better known online as Money with Katie. Her podcast, The Money with Katie Show, talks spending habits, smart investing, tax strategies, and more without putting you to sleep. She also shares her insights every week to her hundreds of thousands of Instagram followers and newsletter subscribers. But today, Money with Katie is opening up about how she fell for a scam and was robbed of roughly half her net worth at the time back in 2019. And of course, how you can recognize red flags to avoid the same fate. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Katie, thank you so much for joining us here on the Newsworthy once again.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to really dive into your own personal experience with being scammed. You've been open about it. It happened back in 2019. So let's walk through what happened. It was pretty elaborate, it sounds like. And it all started with a phone call from someone claiming to be from your credit union, right? Tell us how it started.
I got a phone call from a number that I didn't actually have saved in my phone, but I noticed that the area code was local to me. So when I saw it coming through, I was driving through rush hour traffic. This feels like a really inconsequential detail, but I do think that that is an intentional part of being scammed, is kind of getting targeted in moments where you're maybe not paying that close of attention or your attention is divided. And so I answered the phone, and yes, the person on the line asked me if I was traveling. I said no. They said they were from my local credit union where I banked at the time, and effectively told me that someone in Los Angeles, California was trying to use my debit card. And I asked them to turn the card off, to block the charges, and then basically a very elaborate hours-long saga unfolded from there.
In hindsight, were there any immediate red flags that maybe you didn't catch because you were distracted or because it sounded so legit?
Absolutely. I think one of the major things that I would call out is that it's actually quite rare for your financial institution to call you and start, asking you about specific purchases.
Okay, so you told them to turn it off. What happened next?
Next, they wanted to keep me on the line, and they kept asking me other questions about whether or not I was receiving fraud text alerts. So I told them I hadn't gotten any alerts. And so they told me, that's a problem. Like, we called you because you weren't responding to the alerts. And again, in retrospect, this is very fishy, but at the time I was distracted. And this was before the time when text messages from banks for dual factor authentication and things of that nature would say, "We will never call you and ask for this code." Text messages at that time didn't say that. I think that the reason they started saying that is because this particular scam became very popular. But anyway, they basically said, "We're going to send you another code. Can you tell us when you receive it and read it back to us?" So I did. And that actual interaction of the code being sent and then me reading it to them was kind of the moment in which the fraud took place.
Because they were trying to access your bank and they were the reason you got an alert, and then you told them the code to actually get into your bank account.
Correct. So it's called a middleman scheme. They would call your bank and pretend to be you and then call you on the other line. So they would be going back and forth between you and the bank. And so when they told me they were going to send me a code, it was actually the bank thinking they were speaking with me, sending me the code. And then when I read it to them, they went back to the bank and said, "Yeah, the code is this, lift the ATM limit." And so that was what they were orchestrating between me and the bank, unbeknownst to either of us.
So they'd put you on hold, go give the answers to the bank, and then get the next question, say, "Okay, just a second," and go get it from you and kind of do this back and forth.
Right. That's another really good learning from that situation is that those long pauses should have alerted me, as well as the fraud department of the credit union, frankly, that something was not right.
Okay, so you later go and check your accounts. Everything seems fine, right? Or what happens next?
Yeah, that was the strangest part, is that when I got home that night, I logged into my checking account and everything looked normal. In fact, I didn't even see the fraudulent charges that they claimed happened. So I thought, all right, I guess everything's fine. I guess the charges have been removed. I guess everything's safe. But they had instructed me on the phone not to log into the account. They claimed something ridiculous about how they were setting up a trap on the account because someone in California was trying to log into it. Again, in retrospect, all of this seems so obvious.
Well, it's always easier to look back at it and say, I should have known. But in the moment, something seems legit. Yeah.
Yeah. Particularly because they knew my address. They knew my social security number. They knew the number of the card itself. And so it wasn't until I logged into the account the next morning that I realized something had gone very wrong, because there had been dozens of transactions, $1,000 gift cards that were purchased, ATM withdrawals for $400 over and over and over again. They had withdrawn or somehow accessed roughly $8,000 that was now out of the account. Because remember, this is a checking account, not a credit card. So it's not as though they were running up charges on something that I could dispute. The money had been physically removed from the account. So that's the point that I panicked.
And to be clear, that wasn't chump change for you.
No, at the time, it was probably, if I recall, half my net worth maybe at the time.
Yeah. What was your reaction as you looked at your account?
Well, the funny thing is that at the time, I didn't even put two and two together that the person on the phone that I had been speaking with wasn't actually from the bank. I just thought, oh my God, what a terrible fraud department. They told me they were going to lock down this account, and now a lot of the money is gone. So I drove to the physical branch of the credit union in tears, and I tell them, I was under the impression, I heard from someone from your fraud department last night. They told me they were going to protect the account. Now all the money's missing. You need to help me. And they pulled up the account as well as looked at the text messages that I had received and the phone number that had called me. And they said, yeah, that's us. That's our phone number. Those are our text messages. You're going to have to go file a police report, because until you do, we can't really do anything else about this. We don't know that this isn't you trying to defraud us.
Okay, so you were told you have to go file a police report. So you went and did that. Tell us what happened from there.
So I go to the police station. The police officer basically told me it's going to be fine. You're going to get your money back. They took down my information. They filed the report. It was pretty anticlimactic, to be honest. And then I took that report back to the bank and I said, here you go. I'm going on the record saying that this was not me. I've now involved the authorities. Over the next couple of days, I continued to return to the bank to try to work with the fraud department to figure out what had happened. And it wasn't until the head of the branch had worked with the fraud department to listen back to the phone calls to realize, oh, it was a middleman scheme. The person that we were speaking with was also this fraudulent, scam operator. And so that was how we kind of put two and two together. And I learned by the end of the week that there were two other bank members, other people that banked at that credit union, that the same thing had happened to. So I don't actually know to this day how the information of me and other people that banked at this credit union got out, but it was a pretty elaborate scheme.
So did she get her money back? We'll get into it. Also, Gaddy Tassan shares her number one piece of advice to avoid a scam like this. And no, this one isn't about your passwords. Plus, why her experience convinced her to move her money out of the credit union. And we discuss how artificial intelligence could make these scams even more convincing. But first, a break for our sponsors. If you're looking to upgrade your bedroom and your sleep, look no further than Boll & Branch. I love my bed. I love getting in at night, and it's in large part thanks to Boll & Branch. Literally on my bed right now is the Boll & Branch linen duvet set in the relaxing shade of mist, and their signature sheets in white, though I do also have another set in the soothing color of sky that I really love as well. Boll & Branch's best-selling signature sheets feel fabulous on night one, but they actually get softer with each wash. And get this, Boll & Branch offers a 30-night worry-free guarantee, so you can wash, you can style, and sleep in their sheets for an entire month. And if you don't love them, you can just send them right back. And Boll& Branch does not just have sheets. Boll& Branch has the airiest blankets, most cloud-like duvets, fluffiest pillows, and so much more. I'm a lifelong fan, and I'm not the only one. They're loved by millions of sleepers. So sleep better with the softest, most breathable bedding from Boll& Branch. Get 15% off your order with the promo code NEWSWORTHY at bollandbranch.com. That's Boll and Branch, BOLLAND branch.com with the promo code NEWSWORTHY. Exclusions apply. See site for details. The Newsworthy is also brought to you by Trade Coffee. Trade Coffee believes anyone can make great coffee at home. All you need is access to the best beans, roasted to order and curated for your personal taste, which is exactly what they provide thanks to their in-house team of coffee experts, 50-plus small batch specialty coffee partners, and 450-plus rotating roasts. From dark roasts to decafs, espressos to cold brew and iced coffee, you can discover the best coffee suited to your taste with Trade Coffee. I personally get bored easily, so I really wanted to try some unique, more adventurous types of coffee, specifically for my new espresso machine after I moved. And Trade Coffee really delivered in more ways than one, with super high quality, great tasting blends that show up right to my door. So it is convenient, and I love trying something new with every bag. And while I definitely think you will love Trade Coffee yourself, this is also a great option as a gift for your loved ones. We've got graduations, Father's Day, summer birthdays. Those are all coming up, and you really can't go wrong with better, exciting coffee. Give Trade a try for a month and see how you can make better coffee at home. Right now, they're offering 30% off your first month of coffee when you visit drinktrade.com/newsworthy. That's drinktrade.com/newsworthy for 30% off a month of coffee. drinktrade.com/newsworthy. Okay, now back to our conversation with Money with Katie. So were you able to get your money back after the scam?
By that Friday, so, just within a matter of days, Visa had reimbursed me for the funds.
You were lucky to get your money back because that's not always the case, right? Especially when you're dealing with a checking account.
I believe because I still had possession of the debit card, that worked in my favor. I think they're much stricter if you don't have possession of the card and if someone else has it and is running up charges. I would say, though, that most times if you're being defrauded in that way, you will get your money back, but reporting quickly is important. If I had waited months to do anything about it, or God forbid, if it had been maybe a scam that was taking out smaller amounts of money that maybe weren't very noticeable and too much time had passed, there is a sort of statute of limitations that can happen here where they'll say, sorry, it's been, 60 days or too much time has passed, that money is gone.
I remember Bravo's Andy Cohen came out in, I think, January that he was the victim of a very elaborate scam that he kind of went through. And it sounds like from what he said that he completely lost his money. And I know he's a celebrity and probably has a lot of money, but I mean, I don't know how much he lost. And this is likely happening to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's pretty prevalent, which is why it's so important that we talk about it openly, and share the details. That way people kind of know what to look for. Because in the aftermath, I was kind of Instagram living the entire thing. As soon as it happened, I was on Instagram stories talking about it. And then through every single step of the process, I was updating people. Okay, here's what we just found out. Okay, now we know it was this. Okay, now the bank understands what's going on. And in the months and years that followed that, I can't even tell you how many people have reached out to me and said, somebody called me basically trying to do the same thing to me. And I only knew that it was fraudulent because I had seen what happened to you and learned all about how these types of scams happen.
Yes, so important. And I think, you're right that too often people maybe feel embarrassed that they fell for it or something. And so it is kind of hush-hush for a lot of people. But I think as you learned and as we're hearing more and more of the stories, that it can be very sophisticated. And I'm curious, with artificial intelligence becoming bigger and bigger and more widespread, that I feel like it's only going to get more sophisticated as AI can change people's voices and it's more prevalent and readily available. Do you have any thoughts on how AI could make scammers even more money in this way?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. The ability to change voices or, think about the sheer amount of information that is out there about people online. This is also, I believe, why a lot of scammers target people that are older who may be less technologically, digitally savvy and might be less skeptical. So really common scams involve calling people who are older. They'll get the information about who this individual's, children or grandchildren are on Facebook or some other social networking site, and then cobble together this story about how this, oh, your grandson's in trouble. He's just been arrested and he doesn't want, I'm a police officer and he doesn't want me to call his parents, but the bail is this. Here's where you can wire the bail and we'll let him go. There's all sorts of things like that kind of rely on a level of, I would say a trusting nature, we'll say, or maybe you lack that skepticism or digital savviness that like, hey, maybe. But if they can make it sound like your grandson himself is calling you, I think all bets are off.
Yeah, it's scary. And, I think even for people who consider themselves to be savvy technologically or I won't fall for a scam. I mean, we hear so often of the things we're supposed to do that I think that it does come to a point where it's either boring or inconvenient because so much of our lives are wrapped up in using the technology that gives us convenience. And so is it hard to get people to kind of pay attention to this sort of thing? I mean, even when we've had experts on to tell us use certain passwords or something, it just feels kind of like, yeah, we've heard this a million times. But until you're a victim of it, it's probably kind of hard to get people to pay attention and really think about it.
Yeah. And I think that's the good news is that one of the easiest and best ways that you can protect yourself is to just not answer phone calls from numbers that you don't know. It is best to let it just go to voicemail. Listen to the voicemail and then, do your due diligence of calling it back if you think that it's real. Because while a phone number can be spoofed coming in, it can't be spoofed going out. So if you get a phone call that looks like it's from your bank and you look up the number and it's like, yeah, that's my bank. If you call that number back, you're going to get the real bank. You're not going to call back the scam artist. So that is a very easy thing to do. I think the password example is a good one. At the time, I was one of those people that did use the same password for everything. And fortunately, they didn't actually have access to the account. That's why they needed me and why they were going back and forth between me and the bank. But at the time, had they gotten the password somehow, whether through me or through some other means, they would have had access to every single financial institution that I banked with because it was the same password. So then I got really serious about, I'm going to have really in-depth passwords and they're all going to be different and whatnot. That one I think is to your point, it's a little bit more like, all right, yeah, we've heard this a million times. But another really easy thing that people can do is just freezing your credit with the three major bureaus. Basically, it makes it so that if someone, does somehow get your identifiable information, your name, your social, your address, these things that you would need to try to open up a loan or open a credit card in your name, which a lot of it is on sale for on the dark web. It's not that hard to get. But if you freeze your credit, then all of those attempts get blocked. And so then if you actually need to subscribe or rather open a credit card or, apply for a loan, you just go in and lift the freeze for a day when you're applying. But otherwise, it just kind of keeps things very locked down and it kind of limits the damage that someone can do if they do somehow come upon that information of yours.
So you mentioned that after being scammed, you pulled the rest of your money out of the credit union and went to Chase Bank. What's your take now on, credit unions versus big banks, especially when it comes to their ability to protect your money?
Well, I never want to be the big bank apologist. I don't think that big banks are not necessarily a net positive for society always. But in this case, I did find it pretty interesting that I had just spent the last probably 72 hours as the most frequent visitor of this credit union because of, pretty substantial fraud. And when I went to get my money out, I walked over to a different section of the bank and asked them to write me a cashier's check. They didn't even ID me. They just handed me a cashier's check for all the money in the account. And I was like, yeah, all right. So I don't know that I can speak for all credit unions. And I think that in a lot of ways, credit unions can be a great thing because, they're local, they're more focused on the community. You can get better rates on loans. You can get better interest rates in your accounts. But I do find that the downside can be that if they're a small local operation, they probably don't have the, large scale institutional protections in place and like long standing, Chase Bank sees a lot of fraud attempts, I would assume, because they're huge. They're a huge institution that's been around for a really long time. And not to say that fraud doesn't happen there, but I do feel, I would say, on the safer side, knowing that my money and my checking account and whatnot is in a bigger institution now, just because I think I've obviously a little gun shy about smaller ones having had that happen and having their fraud department, miss some pretty obvious red flags.
I'm guessing the person that stole from you was never caught.
I don't know. I don't think they were. This kind of stuff probably happens pretty often. There is a bit of a resignation around it, I think, with a lot of these banks that Visa's going to reimburse the person. So I think in some ways they consider it kind of a victimless crime. They probably don't have the resources to chase down every tip because while $8,000 was a lot to me, that's like nothing to a huge financial institution.
Any final thought or, takeaway or words of wisdom as we wrap up here?
I think just to use your common sense. And again, I think my biggest takeaway is to not answer the phone if you don't know the phone number. I think that'll save people a lot of heartache.
Well, thanks again to Katie Gaddy Tassan for sharing her story with us and giving such great advice on how to avoid falling for these types of scams. Be sure to listen to her podcast, The Money with Katie Show, and visit her website, moneywithkatie.com, for more money-related resources. A quick note, we will not have a new episode of The Newsworthy this Monday due to the Memorial Day holiday, but we'll be back on Tuesday with our next 10-minute news roundup to help you start the work week in the know. Until then, thanks so much again for listening and for sharing the show. Have a great holiday weekend.